Okay, for the people who don't know me yet, my name is André Ruiter, and I'm from the Netherlands, or Holland if you like. I'm no stereo photographer. I learned about stereo views while working as a black and white photographer on a project about the battlefield of Verdun in France. And I worked for 10 years on that project, and I wanted an original trench map of the battlefield. But instead of finding that map, I found all kind of obscure little glass stereo views of the battlefield, and I got really interested in those slides. And since 2 years, I'm a collector of stereoscopy antiques. I collect mainly World War I and French boudoir stereo views, as well as stereoscopes, cameras, and everything that's related to stereo photography from 1850 till 1930. So everything from the glass era. And in this presentation, I want to tell you about a collection of stereo negatives from the early days of the First World War. I've prepared some anaglyphs, so get your glasses ready. Last year, my attention was drawn to a collection of stereo negatives offered on eBay. It concerned 24 stereo glass plate negatives in the format 8 by 18 centimeters, or 3.2 by 6.1. They're quite large, and the negatives show images of the mobilization during the First World War in the city of Nevers in France. And the slides were offered individually, and I managed to get 21 out of 24. Unfortunately, I was outbid on 3 slides, and that's a shame because I think such a collection should stay together. Well, that's part of the game on eBay. You win some and you lose some. What was very interesting is that there were also 2 cardboard boxes with descriptions. They were shown on the auction, but these were not part of the auction. And afterwards, I've contacted the seller and asked if I could buy the boxes or possibly get a higher resolution scan, because I suspected that they contained valuable information about the negatives. And the seller was kind enough to send me the boxes for free because I bought most of the negatives. So the 2 boxes are numbered with the numbers 30 and 31 in Roman numbers. And according to the boxes, the total collection consisted of 34 negatives, of which 4 slides from box 31 are probably not related to the war, and they were added to the box later. And 24 glass plates were offered on eBay, so the collection was no longer complete when it was auctioned. And I said I now have 21 slides of the collection. And the special thing is that each negative is numbered, and the number relates to the description on the box. So the descriptions contain the subject, the place, and the exact date, which makes the collection historically significant, I think. And the stereo views of the First World War were booming after the war, but those that were published in large volumes by publishers such as Stereoscopie Universelle or Brentanas, they lack this kind of detailed information, or the information is simply not accurate. So this is, I think, quite a very interesting collection of negatives. So I call it the Nevers collection, and that's for a reason, because all images are shot in the city of Nevers in France. And the photos were taken on and around the railway station of the city. And as you can see on this map, Nevers is located in the center of France. It has a very large railway station. And during the war, it also had a facility for repairing locomotives. So this made it a logistically important hub for the French army. And I've done some research about Nevers, and I've seen there are a lot of POW camps, and several hospitals were built in and around Nevers. So this emphasizes the importance of the city. So the negatives show images of the mobilization of the French army in Nevers. The First World War started on July 28, 1914. The direct cause was the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, but the real causes were lying deeper. But this assassination triggered a chain reaction, causing all European powers be at war with each other in a very short time. And Germany had declared war on France on the 3rd of August, and the photos of the collection were taken in August and October 1914. And the first photo dates from August 9, so the war was less than a week old for the French. And this makes it very special because images from the early stages of the conflict are very rare. Most images date from 1915 to 1918. And what's interesting is that in 1914, the war was welcomed by all participating countries, and the horrors of the trenches were still far away in these first weeks. Every country thought it would be victorious, and all soldiers would be back home by Christmas. So it was a kind of a huge party in those first weeks. And this sentiment is clearly reflected in the photos. The atmosphere is patriotic, as you can see on this image with the French flag. It's relaxed with a lot of smiling soldiers. So what do we know about a photographer? Well, the name of him is unknown, but I guess it was a professional photographer. Stereo photography in France was dominated in the early 20th century by compact stereo cameras for the 45 by 107 millimeter and 6 by 13 centimeter formats. And these formats were introduced by Jules Richard in 1893, and he revived stereo photography in France. And these compact formats made photography accessible to amateurs. Our photographers' large 9 by 18 centimeter negatives required a large and expensive camera and also the skills to operate it, which is less obvious for an amateur. And in addition, all negatives are very accurately indexed and preserved, which indicates the work of a professional. I've also seen more negatives from the same photographer. They were offered also by the seller on eBay. These did not contain images of the war, but were all numbered and indexed in the same way. So I suspect that the photographer was from Nevers or the surrounding area, because all the photos were taken on different days in August and October, as I said. And a local photographer could be on site very quickly. So I assume he was from Nevers. So what I think, and of course I'm not completely sure because the only notes I have are from the boxes, but I think the photographer was hired by the French army. Most of the photos are staged, which indicates that the photographer had permission to shoot, as photography was censored by the army during the war. So there was no way that this photographer could just go to the station and make his images. The First World War was the first major conflict in which photography played an important role. In May 1915, the French army founded its own photography section. It was called La Section Photographie de l'Armée, or SPA. And this section produced 120,000 photos during the conflict, including 20,000 stereo photos, and also a large collection of autogram color images. But these pictures are made in 1914, and before the creation of the SPA, the French army simply hired professional photographers. And this probably included our photographer, who had to capture the mobilization in Nevers for documentation, propaganda purposes, or maybe just to inform the public by newspapers. And this also explains the accurate descriptions on the boxes with dates and unit numbers. So why stereo photos? Stereos were primarily intended for entertainment and not necessarily for publication in albums or newspapers. Well, my best guess is that this was just the only camera the photographer had, and the size of the negatives made it possible to use half stereos for printing purposes in albums or newspapers without any problem. So finally I want to show you two special images from the collection. This image shows stretch carriers of the Tirailleur unit. This unit was part of the Colonial Troops of the French army. The Tirailleur was an infantry unit, and the soldiers were recruited from the French colonies in Western Africa, like Morocco and Senegal. And you can see the Red Cross flag on the wagon, indicating that these soldiers belong to a medical unit. Got another picture of the Colonial Troops. As you can see, these photos are clearly staged, which means that the photographer had permission to shoot on the station of Nevers. You may also notice that soldiers were transported in freight wagons. This was common practice during World War I, but also during World War II. Passenger wagons were only used by officers. So, and my last image is a picture of German prisoner of war. You see a couple of German soldiers inside the wagon, and they're guarded by two French soldiers on the front, and also some railway workers on the foreground. This photo is made on October the 5th. And in September 1914, the German advance in France had come to a halt during the Battle of the Marne. And from that moment, the Western Front turned into a horrible trench warfare that would last until November 1918. So no soldier would be at home for Christmas, unfortunately. So this was my presentation. Thank you for your attention. I hope you liked it. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.